some good spirit. It really touched me. And I just felt like, let me give myself a second chance to be brave enough to stand again here to speak to you guys. Because I can't be shy for too long. I have to open up. This is my day. As I said, this is my greatest achievement. It was not easy. It was not easy. So I have to be brave. As the book is titled Good Life Problems. In most cases, I'm not saying we force life, but we always want good things to happen always on our own time. You know, I have only made preparations yesterday for my book launch. I didn't even have any money. I had to sit with myself, by myself. I have to give myself a lead time. I told myself, of course I knew that I was going to have a book launch, but I didn't know which direction to take. But I told myself that I will make it possible, I will make it happen. Of course, I have went through circumstances, and I'm grateful that it brought me as I stand here. It gave me so much power within myself, and I'm proud that having to write this book, I'm not just proud of myself, but I'm as well inspiring those. Sorry, I think I'm still panicking. But
okay, sis.
yeah, so Honorable Amateur Fellows, can you please come here and just present something?
Thank you so much. A very good evening to all of you. Photographer mimi no tate. Photographer nawa. Yalo. Onawa. So as introduced, my name is Emma Theophilus, Member of Parliament, Deputy Minister of ICT. I'm very happy to be here tonight. As been extended invitation by my older brother there, Dr. Kashikola, who was kind enough to extend the invitation on behalf of Peno for me to be here tonight. I recognize the presence of Dr. Martha Mujabo-Tilahoon, who spoke before me this evening, and all the speakers that spoke before. Good Life Problems, a book by Peno. I had some time to skim through the book, and as I was reading the book, I came down to a few topics that I thought was important for me to tackle tonight and to give in my speech. The first, I think, is a reflection upon my own life, where I reflected on how I've had a positive relationship with failure. And I think that's important, and I think that's a theme that runs through the book, and I reflected on it myself, because once you have a positive relationship with failure, you're able to overcome it. There's no way we can all through our lives have only ups. There will be downs. It's how life is. In fact, that's how the earth is created. There's not only a flat surface, and we do not only go up mountains. At some point we do come down mountains. And as the saying goes, what goes up must come down. But it doesn't mean that you can't go up again. And that's why I think in my life I have developed a personal and positive relationship with failure, because it means I can overcome it. And once I think you do yourself a favor and develop a personal relationship with failure, you too shall overcome it. And this I've done through many areas of my life. I was very active as a young teenager, as an adolescent. I participated in multiple activities, whether sports, whether public speaking, whether debating. And you do learn that at some point you do fail. And once you are able to conquer failure, you are then able to face it head on, and you can only go up from there. So that's the first reflection on my end as I read the book. The second one is another theme that has been running in the book, which is pain. And Peno has indicated through the speech she read here that has come out in the book in different editions. And pain, all of us, I think, have experienced. Whether it's when we're toddlers and we're told not to touch a hot stove or a fire because we're curious, we learn to deal with pain and we learn to experience pain. And there's a famous saying, or very quotable saying that I saw in a movie and a book I read called The Fault in Our Stars, where it said, pain demands to be felt. And I think that's true. You cannot experience pain and do not expect to feel it. When you experience pain, you have to feel it because that's pain. In order for you to learn from it, to grow from it, to come out a new person, you need to experience pain. And pain definitely needs to be felt. And that's what I think Peno did in putting the pain chapter in various editions in the book to highlight the importance of pain. Then I think the next thing I want to talk about is when you do experience pain, you might believe you are a victim. Many of us can come from a victim to a victor, which is very true. Because you cannot be a victim forever. Then what's the point of it all? Why did you go through your experience if you cannot come out as a victor, come out victorious? And I think that's something the President has said many times and I've learned from him. Dr. Hage Geingob always says he's not a victim, he's a victor. He does not see himself as a victim or pity himself. He sees himself as a conqueror. And so even though we see sometimes we have a phase in life where we are victims, we can become victors. And in our stories, although we can be victims, we need to recognize that in other people's stories, we can be villains. We cannot always be the ones experiencing pain. We are human beings. We also need to recognize that in someone else's story, we are the villain and that we possibly could cause pain. And that is where we need to at some point hold ourselves accountable for the pain we've experienced, but possibly for the pain we are causing others. So we also need to recognize that in other people's stories, we are villains and not only victims in our own stories. Then of course comes the big topic, mental health. Whether it's suicide that we have seen has been on the rise, whether it's betrayal that also Benwameni talks about in the book, or depression, a topic we don't always talk about, and I must be honest, many a times in our black families and communities. But at the end of the day, we must recognize that we are social beings. We get boxed into boxes on how we should be as brothers, as sisters, as mothers, as fathers, as uncles and aunties, as sisters and brothers, in whatever social standing we have. We get boxed in being told how we should behave, how we should act. And this sometimes brings up emotions we cannot deal with because nobody else understands. And where does this come from? It comes from our social settings. We relate to each other as human beings in different ways. Through our religious beliefs, through our cultural norms, through our traditional values. All of those shape who we are. Many a times when we introduce ourselves, we just don't say, I'm Emma Phyllis. You sometimes say, you introduce yourself by the language that you speak, by the culture that you practice, by the religion that you practice. These are all social norms or social settings that shape us as who we are as human beings. But I think the biggest challenge is actually putting yourself in that setting and knowing who you are and not pinning your identity on the social settings that we are put by our families and our loved ones. The truth of the matter is, I am Matthew Phyllis, I'm a Christian, but I could have easily been born in India, and I could have easily been an Indian who identifies as Hindu. I could have easily been born in Tibet and could have been a monk. I could have easily been born in Brazil and identified as a Brazilian, not an Ashwapa speaking person, not as a Namibian. So we cannot allow some of the social norms to try to box us into who we not are, but more importantly, not to discriminate others by what we are not. And I think that's sometimes the challenge, that we discriminate others based off because we think who we are is superior, or that we think what we know is more important than others. That is not true. Because we could have easily been born anyway. We did not choose where, when, or how we came on this earth. What we can only do is be grateful for the opportunity of life, and that we're able to speak with one language, and that is kindness for one another. And that is why mental health is such a problem, because we're not able to be tolerant, we're not able to be kind to one another. We cannot let that continue any longer. We need to go beyond the identifiers of who we think we are. And because of that, being social beings and being brought up in social norms, as a former science student, because I'm a lawyer by profession, I did science in high school. I learned in my biology class that as human beings, we are 55 to 60% water. And I think that's significant, because that tells you, because when you compare water and a rock, you can already see the difference. Water moves. Water is constantly in motion. It is alive. And as human beings, we too are alive and we are constantly in motion. And that is why we have feelings. We have a sense of belonging. We have things we agree with and don't agree with, and are affected by people's words, are affected by people's actions, because we are constantly in motion. We are social beings, and therefore, whether it's inside the planet or across on the surface, we are human beings in motion. And that's why we can be moved when we see somebody else crying, when we see somebody else laughing. We are able to be moved because we are made up of majority water. And that is why we don't recognize, when we don't treat one another with kindness, we think we are rocks, but we are not. We are constantly in motion because we are made out of water and made up of water that we can consider as life. Well, I would like to move on to the next topic before I come to my last one, which is something I've observed, not only in my current profession, but generally as a young Namibian, as a young person in this country, whether it's on social media, whether it's through etiquette or how we interact with one another. The reason why we have challenges is because the way we treat one another on social media platforms, and here I'm speaking directly to young people, and also how we try to relate with other human beings who are not going through what we are going through. And I say this because recently we celebrated or commemorated